Welcome back all. Today we're going to be discussing Chapter 10, which is Verbal and Visual Support and Presentations. So in Chapter 9, we really went through and dissected what goes into our preparation outlines as we move into speeches and presentations. So we talked about all of the elements we need in our introductory paragraph, and again, this outline is provided for you in your modules. And this first one gives you what needs to go in each piece, and the second one tells you or gives you an example of what it might look like with actual content in there. So again, we went over the 5 pieces of the intro. We went over that we need to summarize and close in our conclusion. We spent quite a bit of time with these planning purposes at the top of our page, discussing the general purpose, specific purpose, and central idea. Then we also went into the body here where we talked about organizational patterns and how different organizational patterns will fit different messages and audiences, different purposes. And then we talked about how we structure our main points. What we haven't really covered yet, and what this chapter covers, is what goes into our subpoints. So our subpoints in the body of the speech are really kind of the meat of our presentation. It's where all of our statistics and our explanations, our examples are related to the topic. So these need to be well thought out as well, and they always need to directly support the claim that you're talking about at that given time. So again, main points, we call them claims, and we need to have at least 2 pieces of support of evidence to back up your claim, your main point. So here, guys, you can see that you have at least an A and a B. You can have a C, D, E, F, all the way down, but typically trying to stay probably around 5 using that same rule that we use for main points, 2 to 5. And then if you have where you can even dissect maybe A further, you can indent under A and have a 1 and a 2. So you've added another level. Some people will get more in depth there, and maybe 2 has more that you can share. So you indent and you have a baby A and a baby B. But just knowing that whenever you break into a new level of subpoints, that level needs to be supported by at least 2 points of support. So what we're going to get into today, again, is how we can structure this support best for our topics and our audiences. Alright, so here we are in our lecture, again, Chapter 10, Verbal and Visual Support and Presentations. And the first thing we're going to talk about here, guys, is the functions of supporting material. So I like to think about this as our supporting material is kind of like the 3rd level of how we are explaining our content. So we went from the central idea, again, that overall goal of the speech, and then we broke those down into likely about 2 to 5 main points, right? And our main points are then broken down by our supporting material. So we're just getting more detailed as we go. So again, functions of supporting material, that A and B at least. This is anything that backs up claims in the presentations. Those claims are our main points. And the functions, it offers clarity to content, interest, and proof. So clarity makes abstract or complicated ideas more understandable. So I'm going to use the example of roasting a turkey, like for Thanksgiving. So my main point might read something like, there are 6 steps to roasting a turkey. Well, I need some clarity there, right? I need to actually know those 6 steps if I'm going to be the one that is roasting the turkey for Thanksgiving, right? So there I know that I might even have 6, so an A, B, C, D, E, F there, if I want to really break it down. Maybe I provide the first 2 steps in one level of support, the second 2 steps under B, and the third or the 5th and 6th under C. So you can break it up however you'd like, however you think is the most digestible to your audience. But then you're going to add clarity. You're going to actually describe that process to us, right? Each point of support would describe what needs to be done per each step. Then we could also add some interest in there, right? So maybe that process is a little bit boring, so we need to make our claims more vivid and meaningful, so providing that interest. Here we might be able to add in some extra points to describe how the process is affecting the turkey. So maybe addressing the 5 senses. Your house is going to start to smell amazing, and you're going to start to get hungry when you smell this turkey. You should go and check, and it should be golden brown and a little bit crispy on the top, right? So you might start to appeal to your audience's senses so that they are able to, again, follow that process and know, kind of just giving them clues that they're doing the process correctly. And guys, because again, that's where you might even break under A or B and add another level of subpoints there just to add in those little tidbits of interest. Another function of supporting material is to provide proof. So you can prove claims by backing them up with facts and statistics. Proof that the recipe has been well received here might work well for our roasting a turkey example. So maybe I'm looking at a recipe online and I see that it has 5 stars and 65 reviews. So if it's aggregating 5 stars out of 65 reviews, that means quite a few people have tried this recipe, they've liked it and had success. So I might see proof that this recipe is working well. Maybe I got it from Pioneer Woman or another reputable chef that puts out a lot of cookbooks, and I'm gathering some proof that this is a credible recipe through that. So we always want to provide clarity, interest, and proof with our supporting material. Next, we'll talk about definitions. So this falls under verbal support. And definitions, guys, there's lots of different types of definitions. So we'll go through these definitions in terms of a term, and I'll give you some examples about how the definition changes depending on the type of definition. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples here, and I'm going to use the word formula. So if you look up the denotative, the dictionary definition of formula, there's 3 main definitions that pops up. So one is a group of symbols that make a mathematical statement. 2 is directions for making something, and 3 is a liquid food for infants. So those are 3 denotative definitions of the word formula. A connotative definition then, go back. Okay, a connotative definition then is what emotions does the term evoke. So I am not a math person, and the connotation for me in terms of a formula, I might feel anxiety about going into a math test, for example, where I had to know a lot of formulas. I might feel good about it if I am a math person because I can anticipate that I will get consistent answers. It's kind of black and white there in math, right? And another connotation, if we were thinking about it in terms of formula for infants, maybe we feel soft and cuddly because you are going to be holding a baby when you're feeding them the formula, something along those lines, right? Then if we think about the word formula in terms of the operational definition, and guys, the operational definition is not in your book, but I wanted to provide it for you as well. This one's a little harder to think about in terms of the word formula specifically. But maybe if you're doing inventory at a business or store and you have a specific formula as to how you accomplish the task, that would be an operational definition within your store, within your business. Another example is I did my thesis research on emojis and I studied emerging adults. And my age range was 18 to 29 to make up that emerging adult age range. Other studies that used the term or the phrase emerging adults would have anything from like 16 to 25, from 20 to 30, and there were lots of different age ranges. So I had to operationalize the phrase emerging adults for how it fit into my specific study. So I said, for the purpose of the study, emerging adults includes the ages 18 through 29, something along those lines, okay? All right, then we'll move on to etymology. That's very hard to say, etymology. And that is the history of the word. So maybe it has Latin roots, maybe it has Greek roots, German roots. Again, just tracing back the history of that word. There's also negation, and negation is what the term is not. So a math formula typically is not flexible. A formula is not flexible if you're thinking about it in terms of numbers and math. A formula is not solid if you're referencing baby food, right? So you can see how one term can hold a lot of different definitions. One thing I want to caution you here, if you choose to use a definition, sometimes we really need to use that denotative definition if the audience is unfamiliar with a term. But if they are fairly familiar with a term, you do not need to provide that denotative definition. But you might want to add in some of these other types of definitions to help explain and position the word for your audience too. All right, so we'll move into examples. And examples, guys, are best when you use several effective examples together. So you're kind of reiterating your point, but through different perspectives, if that makes sense. So there's three different types of stories that we'll touch on in this lecture. The first of which is fictional. So fictional stories, you can really tailor the structure of the plot to illustrate your point exactly. So that's fun to play around with. So for example, when you were little, or when I was little at least, my parents would use Santa Claus to get us to behave when we were younger and it was around Christmas time. So they would tell us a fictional story about how Santa Claus was going to bring us coal or something along those lines, and then they would use that bribe, I guess, to be better and to act better, behave better, in an effort to not get coal on Christmas, right? We wanted those presents. We wanted this special present, especially from Santa. So they taught us that our naughty behavior was not acceptable in a fun way that taught us a lesson through the holiday season, the holiday spirit with Santa Claus. So all of it was fictional, but it did get to the point and illustrated their points well. A hypothetical story, on the other hand, these are like imagine ifs or once upon a time kind of stories that really help to put the audience in the space of the topic and mentally to understand the context and tone of that information in support of that topic. The last one that I want to touch on is factual, and these can be very helpful to provide clarity, interest, and to prove a point. So I always think back to, we had a guest speaker. I'm from Cody. I went to Cody High School, and we had a guest speaker at the high school one year that had cancer from chewing tobacco, and his jaw, part of his jaw had been taken out, and he came in and stood in front of us all and told his story. And it was a factual story, straight to the point. He didn't spare any detail, and he told us the whole story about how his cancer had affected his life, and even just from, I think he had chewing tobacco for even just 3 years, and he was really using his story to reach out to high school students and others in communities to try and get people to understand the effects, the potential effects of using chewing tobacco. And that example has always stuck with me and resonated with me in terms of chewing tobacco and never even wanting to try it in my life, even avoiding cigarettes, all of those kinds of things. There's always speakers that are coming around to prove a point and show others that they never want to deal with those situations themselves. I know that parents come around and do texting and driving if they've lost a child to a car accident and all those things. So those first-hand recounts of how something affects someone or has affected someone, maybe a disease, how it affects a person or a family, a story from someone's childhood or a past relationship, work experience. It just helps position the topic and helps others understand where that person is coming from and understand the severity of the topic. It just puts them again in that mind space. And as always, guys, we want to go back to that first idea that the most effective verbal support is when you're using several of those instances to really hammer home a point. All right, so moving along from verbal support in the terms of stories, now we'll move on to verbal support in this form of statistics. So I would say statistics are the most common form of verbal support used in speeches and presentations, and our text supports that as well. So a lot of people like to rely on statistics, but we want to make sure that we are choosing the right statistics that have the most impact to our audience about that subject. We want to use statistics sparingly because we don't want to drown out our audience with just a bunch of numbers coming at them throughout the whole speech or presentation. So they are powerful, they are useful, they are used often, but we also want to use them sparingly to have the most impact. Another tip here is to round off your numbers so people aren't going to remember $353,276.53, right? We would just need to round that off to about $300,000. Often also visual aids can complement our statistics well and help us explain and visually see that impact. So pie graphs, Even infographics are becoming more common, like this one, bar graphs, and each of those serve a specific purpose. So again, being sure that you're using the correct form of verbal support to support those statistics the best. Here's an example. This is from 2012, a study done in 2012, and I actually found that in 2016, this 25,000 had risen to over $30,000. But what I wanted to use this infographic for is to show you that we want to be as specific as possible with our statistics to make sure that they hit home with our audience. So just saying that per student the average student debt in 2012 was $25,000, that does have some impact. You're like, wow, that's a lot of money. But then they go further and say 37 million people carry student debt. And here's where they really position that and bring that down for the audience and those people in the audience to understand the impact of those large nationwide numbers on them. And it says 1 out of 10 Americans. So 1 out of 10 Americans have a load of student debt. And that really puts it into perspective for the people sitting in their chairs listening to that presentation. So another way to think about that is proximity. So how can you make it really relate to that person then and now? All right, so moving into our next form of verbal support, we'll talk about comparisons. So comparisons come in the form of figurative analogies and also our literal analogies. So figurative analogies are the statements that you hear all the time in movies, such as life is like a box of chocolates, or from the movie Shrek, ogres are like onions. So you're comparing two unlike things to make a point to the audience and show support for your main point. So characteristics of the comparison should be known to the audience, so both things you're comparing there, and then you need to ensure that the comparison is valid as you're making your point. You can also have very literal analogies. So I've used this example several times in previous classes where I say that CSU and UW are pretty similar universities in terms of population. Both of their campuses are in more downtown locations, yet the University of Wyoming has a parking problem and CSU does not. So that is a literal analogy. Two different schools, two different institutions, but they are comparable, yet there is one big difference, right? So maybe you use that in going forward and saying that UW really has the ability to work out this parking problem. If we get right down to it, maybe we can even compare to how CSU doesn't have a problem and the solutions that they've put forth to ensure that all students and faculty have parking and something along those lines. Again, these analogies really just provide support and help kind of even out those statistics and other factual elements to position the topic and the problem or the idea within the audience's mind. Next, we'll talk about quotations, and there's three main types of quotations as well. So you can have expert quotations, you can have lay quotations, and you can have literary quotations, which are always fun to throw in as attention getters and supplemental points as support within your main points. So expert quotations I always think about when you're watching like SportsCenter or ESPN and they have the panel of ex-athletes or former coaches, people that are very, very prominent in an industry in that specific sport, announcing and discussing and analyzing games and players. So they are speaking from an expert point of view, providing expert knowledge, expert quotations in those instances. Also, you can think about medical professionals, lawyers, just experts in their field and what they have to say that is unique to that situation. You can also have lay quotations. This is the everyday Joe. So the everyday person explaining or providing information about a topic, a situation, that kind of thing. Literary quotations, I have two here. One is from Tolkien, not all those who wander are lost. So you might be able to fit those in and reference that famous author. You might be able to use something by John Steinbeck or other very prominent people. Here's one from him that says, "And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good." So even if you can just throw in those interesting tidbits that ring true and those names that are familiar to the audience and position these and use these as support, it really again just helps balance out the numbers and the other facts and statistics and sources there. So now that we've aggregated all of this content to support our main points, we have to be able to cite those sources and acknowledge where we got this information. So a method to citing our sources, first we want to state the overall point that we're trying to make. Then we need to identify the source, so where is the supporting material coming from? We need to actually state that supporting material, and then we also always need to explain the importance of that material. So here I'll provide you a brief example. Looking at this example here, first we know that we have to state our point. So for example, the temperature of the earth is increasing. Then we need to provide that supporting material. Next we might say, according to Jim Peterson, author of the book Global Meltdown in 2008, it was reported that temperatures worldwide had risen an average of 4 degrees over the course of the last century. Then we might say, as individuals who are ages 19 to 25, it will increase another 10 degrees in our lifetime. So there we can see that we have stated our point, we've stated the sources and provided that citation, and we've also explained why that material is important to the audience. So everything is broken down and fleshed out well for that specific source. We'll also use APA citation format in this class, so we need to remember to include the source, the year, and the page or paragraph number, but only the page or paragraph number if it is a direct quote. So here's a couple of examples. So say I paraphrase some information from Peterson 2008, and I wrote temperatures worldwide have risen an average of 4 degrees over the course of the last century. Then I would just throw on Peterson's last name and the year of publication. If I actually take a direct quote here, then I would cite the author, and if there's no author, use that credible source. So CNN is a credible source. Even if that specific article did not have an author, I would just use CNN, knowing that it was broadcast or published in 2009 and that it was found in paragraph 3. So with the paragraphs, typically paragraphs are used on a web page. So if you're scrolling through a web page, there's not usually page numbers. So in that instance, you have to just count down the paragraphs on that web page, and you indicate that with para, P-A-R-A. Here's another example where you can throw on the author and the year at the very beginning of the citation. So you could say Jones 1998, state the quote, and then put that page number at the end of the quotation. Guys, I also like to use Purdue OWL. I think that's a great resource for APA citation, specifically 6th edition for our class, and I'm always available to help with citation format too. Here, guys, I'm on OWL at Purdue because we need to be able to not only cite verbally and within the text of our outline, as we just talked about. So whenever we cite in the text of our outline, we also need to reiterate that citation verbally. And then all of those citations should match the citations in our reference list. So anything that's in our reference list should also be said verbally and in the text of our outline, and anything said verbally in the text of our outline should be in our reference list. So here you can go on to OWL at Purdue. Right now I'm in electronic sources for the reference list, and they'll give you kind of the format for how the reference should look, and then give you an example as well. So for instance, this is a journal. So you would put the author's last name, initials, the date of publication, typically just the year, the title of the article, and here you can see only the first word is capitalized. Other words that might be capitalized in the title are proper nouns or anything following a colon. So you can see that here that mother is capitalized but nothing else is. Then the title of the article, normal capitalization and in italics, and then how the volume, page number, and DOI should look. So always using Purdue OWL as a reference to double check citations, even if you're using those citations machines that you can find online, please, please, please double check with Purdue OWL to make sure that we're using the most up-to-date version and that things are looking similar. Okay, so we will move on to visual aids in terms of Chapter 10 content. Okay, so moving into the visual aids section of this chapter, we're going to talk about the best ways to use visual aids and some tips for making our visual aids the best they can be. So first of all, we have to have a reason for using the visual aid. There has to be a purpose. And I think a lot of times now, as technology has advanced, our audience almost expects us to use visual aids, but we still need to be able to use them well so that they're effective with that topic. So sometimes even the absence of a visual aid might be effective. Typically, though, we are going to try and complement our message with a visual aid, and that's key, and I'll come back to that here in a second. So we have to have a reason, a purpose for using our visual aid, and our visual aids must match and enhance the topic. So it's always really terrible when you're watching a presentation and you hear a story and there's really you get to the point of the story and it doesn't relate to the topic. Same with visual aids. If you're watching or looking at a visual aid that doesn't necessarily apply to the topic, it can be confusing or even a waste of time in that instance. So again, we want to match and enhance the topic. Visuals should match the audience as well, so you have to think about the sophistication of the audience. Is what you're showing too graphic for them? Is it too basic for them? So always considering our audience, even when we are creating these visual aids and packaging them with our message. We want our visual aids to be large enough to see, so hopefully we are in a space where we can project visual aids, but if not, so for instance, if you are in front of a class of 25 students and your visual aid is on your phone and you're holding up your smartphone, that's probably not going to be the best situation. Everyone is not going to be able to see that, and if you were to pass it around, you get into other complications there that we'll talk about here in a second. So you want to make sure that your visual aid, again, is projected or large enough for the audience to see clearly. Simplicity is a virtue in visual aids, so I think a lot of times we want to load them up to make them the most visually stimulating that they can be, but that's not always the best, right? We want to really be simple and to the point with our visual aids and make sure that they have impact in their simplicity. We also want to keep our visual aids brief, meaning we want to use few words. So here I say that we want our visual aids to be a complement of our message, but not a copy of our message. So we're not putting everything we are going to say on our PowerPoint slides. We're narrowing down, just like we do in our preview section and our central idea blueprint section of our outline, and thinking of those key words, those key phrases that we can introduce on our visual aid to help keep the audience on track, and even us as speakers on track. And then we as speakers are going to elaborate on those points. So the audience can read. We don't want to make them read. We want to make them focus in on us as the speaker and what we have to say about the points that are previewed on those slides. You also want to be sure to label all items, especially graphs and charts. So never leave the audience hanging, wondering why there is an image there. You want to label it and be sure to thoroughly explain it in a presentation as well. And we'll talk more about graphs and charts here as we continue on. Other tips for visual aids, we want to be sure that we are only displaying visual aids when we're ready. So maybe there's only a couple points in our visual aids that we want to highlight with a visual element, and that's fine. You don't have to have a visual aid throughout the whole speech, but it shouldn't be odd or take time extra to set something up, if that makes sense. You shouldn't be pausing. It should be very correlated in how you are presenting that information and very practiced. So you only want to display when ready, and you want to remove the visual aid when you're finished. That's because the audience is always going to be attracted to the visual elements, and if they are no longer relevant or not relevant yet, you always want the information to be, or the attention to be directed back to you as the speaker. Oftentimes, guys, it's great to use blank slides, white or black slides, if you want the attention to be diverted back to you as the speaker, but you want to be sure that you are still on par and set up in your PowerPoint presentation where you can integrate it throughout. I think that works well. So when the audience sees that blank slide, they automatically look back to you, wondering what you're going to say next and wanting you as the speaker to lead them through the message. It's always good to check and make sure that your room is set up wherever you will be presenting and that you have the equipment that you need for your visual aids going forward. So maybe you're using a whiteboard or a chalkboard or a projector or transparencies, even going back old school. You have to make sure that all of those things are in the room and that you are equipped for the type of presentation you are wanting to use. And then guys, we always want to practice with our visual aids. So this should be something like you are making your note cards, you're making your visual aid, and as you're going through your note cards, you're flipping through your presentation, drawing things out if you're going to use a whiteboard, chalkboard, just as you would in your presentation to make sure that those elements all fit together seamlessly in presentation. We want to make presentations more effective, easier to understand than words alone, make statistics easier to understand, add interest, and boost image. And we'll talk about ways to do that here. So functions of visual aids, they show how things look, they show how things work, and they show how things relate. So it brings everything together with a complement of visual and auditory. And it emphasizes important points. So I have the quote down here, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you can talk all you want, but the emphasis and the impact sometimes has to hit them in the face with the message and then complemented with your strong research statistics, examples, and positioning. You can really have a strong effect, a strong impact. So again, going back here, we're adding interest, we're making things easier to understand, and we're making presentations more effective as a whole with the addition of these visual aids. Types of visual aids you can use, here are a few. You can use objects and models, so those may be very effective in certain situations. Photographs, I think, are always effective, and you can always throw a couple into your presentation. And diagrams, depending on the situation, can be effective as well. So I'll go through a few examples here. This is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it talks about Hurricane Katrina. And here in 2015, this is where satellites were able to pick up where the hurricane might hit on the coast. And then in 2015, the satellites have improved and they're 40% more accurate. So that just shows in 10 years how much technology has improved. So if I were to just tell you that in a speech, it's very hard to visualize and think about the impact of on people and the evacuation and the assistance that could have been probably provided and narrowed down a little bit better to help a more concentrated population. But then you see it here, and you see the difference in the area and the actual visual correlation between the facts and the improvements and what was actually shown, and you can see here in the visual aid. Maybe you're also doing a more holistic speech on Hurricane Katrina, and here you want to show some of the devastation that came of that tragic weather. So you might show a couple of images like this and explain the situation surrounding the image. So we never want to just leave the image up there. We always want to provide some additional context from that source. The next types of visual aids, you can use lists and tables. So depending on the information, you will need to pick which kind of chart or graph fits best. So you could use pie charts, bar graphs, column charts, pictograms, or graphs, and there's often a lot of infographics that can be really cool. So here's a couple. Here is a pie chart of what your plate should look like, and I think that's cool because it actually looks like a plate and tells you how much of everything you should be eating in a typical meal. I think this one is impactful when it says for about $20 you could buy all of this KFC, and it tells you the price there for 1961, or it tells you you can buy all of this much healthier selection for a similar amount of money there, and it's a lot more food, as you can see. I guess this one's a little small, but it's telling you obesity trends among U.S. adults, and it's from the CDC, so it's a very credible source there, but it's also only going up to 2003. So at first glance, you think it's a very good visual aid and really shows an increase if that's the point that you are trying to make, but you also need to be sure that you are double checking every piece of the visual aid to make sure that nobody is poking holes in your argument and that everything is as current as possible, unless there is a reason why you are going back to those specific years or that time period. Another one here is about college debt, and this is class of 2014, so I would say it's still pretty applicable, and you can probably see the trend here, just showing the average debt per borrower in each year's graduating class. So you can see the difference about where certain graphs or certain charts, certain graphics, infographics might be more effective, and in some places where a simple bar graph might be the most effective. Then we'll look at video here, and guys, I caution you with video, be sure that you are keeping the video short, and you want to be sure that you are using the video to show a specific action. If you're using it as an attention getter or to relate to the audience, again, we really want to keep it short, and we want to position it well, explain it well, and have everything very practiced. So video on YouTube especially, sometimes you'll have to watch an ad, sometimes you'll have to let it buffer, and that can take time. So you have to be cautious with video, and using amateur footage can be risky. So you always want to have the most professional approach that you can to visual aids, and then make sure that they have a very strategic impact and place in your presentation. So we'll watch an example here. Alright guys, so I played softball growing up, and I've actually taught a lot of girls how to pitch in my community. So I often show this video if I'm doing presentations on pitching, just to make sure that they can actually see the motion if I'm not able to physically show them in that time. So there, the video is short and sweet. It shows the action, and it really fits with my presentations when I am talking about pitching and fast pitch. So making sure that it really correlates, it's not super amateur, that it shows that action, that it's short and sweet. Again, that is key. Okay, moving into media for presenting. We've talked about this a little bit, but sometimes you might have chalkboards. Obviously, making sure you have chalk, dry erase marker boards, making sure you have those markers. You can use flip charts. Those might be effective, especially if you've prepared them in advance. Maybe in a smaller setting, if you don't necessarily want to use a PowerPoint and you want people to be able to offer suggestions that you can just jot down and write all over. More of a workshop type of presentation, I would say flip charts might be helpful. Poster boards, again, sometimes those might fit the situation better than a PowerPoint as well. You can also use transparencies, so those are like the old school projector that you probably used in middle school, where you could erase right on the transparency and you did math and stuff like that. So you can even still use some of those. Sometimes those are very effective. You can use photographic slides, you can use computer displays, PowerPoint and Prezi, and you can even use handouts. Handouts are often great as a kind of a complement to these other elements of visual aids. So maybe you have a print off of your PowerPoint slides, or you have extra notes from your PowerPoint slides or key ideas from your PowerPoint slides, and you're handing those out to your audience. The problem and the challenge there, guys, is that people are often distracted by their handout and not paying attention to you as much. So you want to be sure that you have strict instruction on when you want the handout to be used. Maybe you don't hand it out until they absolutely need it. Maybe you hand it out at the beginning and ask them to put it away. Maybe you hand it out at the end of the presentation as a supplement. Always being strategic and wanting the attention to be fully focused on the presentation when it needs to be. Presentation software here, there's many advantages. You can really customize your material to both you as the speaker, the audience, and the topic. You can provide professional quality. Technology has come a really long way. You can create a variety of materials, so you can show videos, you can play songs, you can show a bunch of photographs, you can have all your keywords. The technology is seemingly endless in what you can do with presentations, and they can be very effective, but we have to be sure that we are doing them well. The dangers of presentation software: sometimes you'll have poorly conceived messages. So again, really thinking through, practicing with, and preparing these visual aids in advance to make a complete package for your presentation. You never want to design over content, so the content should always be the focus. Remember, simplicity is key. We want contrasting colors, so you never want things like a yellow background with an orange text or a red text. We typically want a very light background and a very dark text, or a very dark background and a very light text. And we also want to use sans serif fonts. So sans kind of means without in this instance. And you'll find a lot of fonts that have little tails on them that connect the letters. That's called a serif font. And they're easier to read if you were to read like a piece of paper or a book, so they're often used that way. But they're harder to read on the screen, so we never want the little loop-de-loos on our letters. We want to use sans serif fonts. The good ones are like Times New Roman and Arial, the very simple fonts. And we want plain lines in our visual aid, so everything should match up, like in your margins and in your bullet points. And we want to avoid using too many effects, so they can be cool to add in, but they should have a purpose and never be distracting from our message. Overly complex presentations, again, we want to avoid those. We want keywords and points. We never want these big long sentences or phrases or a complete copy of our message. Our headlines should separate and be bigger, or a change in color or something to pull attention and separate headlines and body text. And then there's the rule of 7 that our text talks about. So no more than 7 lines of text in one slide, and no more than 7 words per line is a good rule to think about as you are preparing slides. Okay guys, that is it for Chapter 10. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with for your visual aids to complement your career research presentations and your sales presentations. I'm happy to help if you run into any problems or have any questions. I'll talk to you all soon.